Welcome into Trucker Talk Radio. You're on Behind the Wheelhouse with J and J. I'm John. This is Justin. Today's guest leads one of Chicago's most established transportation companies, a business that started over 75 years ago, delivering packages in the Chicago Loop on bicycles and motorcycles, and has grown into a full-service asset-based transportation, warehousing, and logistics operation. From Amtrak and Iowa Pacific Holdings to leading ACME Transportation, ACME Logistics, and Allegheny and Western. Tracy Davis has spent decades building relationships and moving freight across multiple modes of transportation: trucking, rail, intermodal, warehousing, and global logistics. What's impressive isn't just the tenure, it's the range. Tracy has seen this industry from every angle you can see it from. Tracy, welcome to the show. We appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you very much. I have to say that sounds way more impressive than I think it is, but I appreciate that.
Well, is there anything that we got wrong? Did we do a good
No, it's
job?
right. It's all correct. Just that just goes to show that I just can't keep a job for very long. Apparently, is really what it boils down to.
Well, you've been in transportation for a long time, so let's start from the beginning. How did you get in it? Was your family involved? Where did you grow up?
I originally grew up in Cleveland, Ohio,
Okay.
and my first job out of college was at a radio station. I actually went to school for radio television, and
Okay.
Oh, okay.
did that for about 3 years, and then I got fired and decided I didn't like radio as much as I thought I did. And to make ends meet, I started driving a delivery truck, and
Oh, nice.
that
Okay.
kind of led from that to being shift supervisor. And I'd always been my biggest love had always been railroads and trains, and so I decided I was going to try to go back to grad school and use that to leverage my way into a railroad job, which turned out to be Amtrak. So I went to grad school at University of Maryland, and at the same time, I started in the Government and Public Affairs Department at Amtrak in Union Station, Washington. And that led to eventually 11 years and about 4 or 5 different Amtrak jobs. And ultimately, the last Amtrak job was here in Chicago. I was developing mail and express loading facilities. That was the time in the mid '90s when Amtrak was essentially running freight on passenger trains. And we'd
I
run
did. I didn't know that. That's
Mm,
something that I didn't know that Amtrak was running freight on passenger trains. When did
mm,
when did that stop?
basically it stopped in the early 2000s.
Okay.
mm, mm.
I mean, Amtrak always, from its very beginning in 1971, always had the ability to run freight on, well, mail and express is how it was termed on its trains, and it just kind of became how do you define express? And so it wound up being sometimes 50-car trains of well, 8 or 9 passenger cars, and the rest of it was either box cars or refrigerator cars or road railers.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got into the freight side of the business. And Amtrak basically changes its mind every 3 or 4 years. And so when they were phasing out the Amtrak Mail Express program, our Mail Express group, essentially many of us formed our own company to buy shoreline railroads, and that's Iowa Pacific. And so
Okay.
when I left Iowa Pacific, we had 4 railroads in about 500 miles of track in Arizona, Colorado, Texas, and New Mexico. And had a bit of a falling out with my partners, and then an ensuing 8-year lawsuit. And every
Yeah,
time I tried
Justin
to
and
do
I
something,
have both been in that
Yep.
predicament, and we've experienced it. It's not fun. It's not fun at
No.
all.
yeah, it's very much like a divorce. Not that I've ever been
Yeah.
It
divorced.
really is.
Yeah. It
And
really. Yeah.
my first experience was I was sitting on a Friday afternoon and I get an email and I was young. I mean, I was probably 28 years old and I opened up an email with 15 attachments and I was like,
Hmm.
what on earth am I dealing with right here? Luckily, my brother's an attorney, so I was able to help. He was able to kind of walk me through it and just kind of, realize it's a cost of doing business, unfortunately.
It is.
Sadly, so yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and in my case, the 8-year lawsuit ensued. Eventually, I won but lost. The attorneys got everything, of course, and
Hmm.
every time I tried to do something in the railroad world, my former partners kept suing me. So I decided that may not be the best
Wow.
route, and so I happened to be casting about looking for something to do, and found this intermodal trucking company for sale on at a business brokerage online, and that's what became ACME Transportation. And so 20 years later, here we are. And so I figured it's close to railroads, not quite. We go to rail yards every day. You know, everything's
Yeah,
you know,
you worked at across rail with Amtrak and Iowa Pacific, and now you're running an asset-based trucking and logistics operation. It's been around for 75 years. Those are very different worlds, are they not?
well, yes and no. I mean, it's all movement of freight, and a lot of the terminology is the same. Let's put it this way: it's close enough that the bank is willing to loan me money to buy the company because they figured I knew how to do it. I knew how to do what I was saying I could do. So yeah.
Well, being in all those sectors, which most of everybody that we ever speak to or even know in the industry has never had that broad of a spectrum. Usually they're, broker and they might move to assets, but not rail and passenger and all that. How has all that help you view the industry now? Because I would think your view maybe is quite different than just the normal trucking professional.
Well, I think what it comes down to is it's looking at all the various pieces that bring it all together. And I think each mode has its own benefits and challenges, and trying to find the best way to move the freight. I think some things just work well going via rail, some things work better going by road.
Hmm.
I'm personally a big believer in railroads, even though I hate them sometimes, but they're tough to deal with a lot of times.
Well, especially in Chicago, right?
Yeah, well, the railroads are basically the 800-pound gorilla that tells you what they want to do and when they want to do it. And if you don't like it that way, then go somewhere else. Oh, but there is
Mhm.
nowhere else.
Nowhere else
So,
to go. Exactly right.
but then again, I've been that, I'm from Cleveland, so we have a chip on our shoulders to begin with. So, being a small trucking company or being Amtrak in the world of Class One railroads, you're always, the ant against the elephants. So it's, it may not be a comfortable position, but it's one I'm the least familiar with.
Let's talk about Acme itself. It sounds like an incredible story. Running packages on bicycles and motorcycles, right? And then expanding into regional trucking in the 50s and eventually growing into intermodal, warehousing, logistics. When you stepped into that president's role, what did you inherit and what have you built on?
Well, when I bought the company, it was essentially like two or three smaller companies, all run by a couple of brothers,
Okay.
who had they were family members of those guys who were delivering the packages on the bikes in the loop. Their father, their grandfather, who had owned the company before them, and I think that this was in 2007 when they had a pretty good run of freight, and so I think they decided. I really think what it really came down to is that one of the brothers who managed the back office had wanted to have a life because he was
Mhm.
essentially doing everything. And what I actually wound up buying was about maybe five tractors of various ages, maybe about a dozen trailers of various ages, one computer, a warehouse lease that had no one in a facility that had no running water, and everything was all the work was handled by pegboard. All the inbound containers were listed on bills of lading sheets that were kept on a pegboard on the wall.
Talk about that for people who don't know what a pegboard is.
Pegboard. Well, it's like, yeah, it's you have a masonite with holes in it, and you've got little hooks on it. And you hang your sheets of paper off it. And it says, okay, here's these are the containers that are coming in next week. That was the TMS system.
That's your TMS system, I was going to
That's
say,
right.
correct?
Yep.
So we're slightly better than that now, but I wouldn't say that we're not a huge user of TMS systems. But what I would say is it's I have a long history of being a penny pincher, and this is a very thin margin business, as you all know, and so I've done my best to try to keep the costs down, and maybe sometimes to the detriment of efficiency, but we've been through the Great Recession now, and now the Great Freight Recession, and here we still are. So I guess I must be doing something right so far.
A lot of industries are not tech savvy as much as, and trucking is definitely one of them. That the internet is about all we have. A lot of these companies they don't use all the bells and whistles that would come out because it's just not how trucking's been. I think we're getting to a point where we've got to do that a little bit more. How do you make those type of decisions of for a listener that's trying to save money and performance over how do you make those decisions that's beneficial to you and your company?
Well, I think it really kind of has to do with scale and cost, right? I mean,
Hmm.
as I mentioned, there really was no methodology keeping track of incoming work when I first bought the company, and so I first started by creating spreadsheets on Excel, and I was familiar with that, and so started creating inbound lists of containers that we were going to be dealing with. I've been familiar with QuickBooks, so we use QuickBooks for accounting. I'm not saying that I necessarily love these systems, by the way. Excel is very powerful. I think I just happen to know how to use it. QuickBooks is okay. It's got its pros and cons, but yeah, I've always had for the last 20 years, I've always had somebody trying to sell me a new TMS system, and
Hmm.
inevitably, what I've discovered, first of all, just part of it's is unique to our situation in Chicago. We're the most complicated intermodal market I believe, in the country, if not maybe the world, because we have, where most places have maybe two or three rail yards or one or two ports. We have six Class 1 railroads and about 18 rail yards, plus additional container yards, chassis start and stop locations. And so it's really complicated when you've got, you'll pick up a chassis at point A, pick your box up at point B, deliver it to the customer, take the box back to point C, then the chassis goes back to point E,
Yeah.
or D, what have you. And this, it's all moving this stuff around. And so what I discovered is I had used some TMS systems earlier on and discovered that I'd had to hire somebody just to keep track of all the moving of just managing the software, which of course defeats the purpose. And also the TMS systems were often very expensive. They want $5,000-6,000 to set it up, 2,000 or 3,000 a month just to maintain it. Then they had to pay for updates, and I just couldn't justify doing that for the size company that we are.
A lot of small and mid-sized companies can't justify it, and that's one of the problems. It's become ridiculously priced, and you're squeezing those small to middle-sized carriers to death. They're gonna have trouble competing.
Right, and so we'll park that thought for a second, and I would say that to answer what we've done is we started with QuickBooks when we were and Excel when we were small enough where we were only a couple of people in the office. When we got a little bit bigger and where we had more remote locations, we switched it to Google Sheets, which is
Hmm.
effectively
Hmm.
effectively Excel, that you can access
We
multiple
use it
people
a
by.
lot.
Yep.
And so it can be a pretty powerful tool. And I wouldn't even claim to know all the capabilities that it's got. It's probably got more than I even know how to use. But
Hmm.
it allows us, multiple people to keep track of what's coming, what's going, and where it is, and where it's going, and whatnot. So, having said that, there are some inefficiencies in that you've got, you're not getting your fuel and your miles for IFTIC in that necessarily. It could be, maybe not, but they don't necessarily integrate. And so it's nice if you can actually enter your data one time instead of multiple times, because otherwise you're just essentially, you're repeating efforts that don't need to be repeated.
Where have we said that before, Justin?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's a motto there.
We're
Well,
affiliated with Ready App, and we talk about it with drivers entering in their information, and that's what we're trying to do at Ready App is basically simplify everything where drivers only have to enter in their information once instead of repeating the process over and over and over again. It's just not efficient. So,
going forward, I mean, I think what's going to happen and how it's squeezing, small and middle sized trucking companies. What I think we're on the cusp because of AI, where I think that, quite honestly, a lot of TMS companies are going to go belly up because it's going to be to a point where if you have somebody to ask the right questions and has some knowledge about how AI works, you could
mhm.
probably build your own TMS system for
You
free.
can. Yeah,
Guarantee it. Yep.
that's exactly right.
And so I think that I was recently at the Transportation Intermediaries Association, where there's
Hmm.
dozens of TMS system purveyors trying to sell this to folks, as well as offshore staffing companies too. And I think that they could well be on the edge of being dinosaurs because of the AI revolution.
Yeah.
In one hand, because everybody will be able to make their own TMS system unique to themselves, and in the case of the staffing companies, you got a computer doing the work, the people aren't.
Well, and even now, I mean, we talk to developers a lot, and the AI, the Claude is Justin was just introduced to Claude,
Mhm.
what, a couple weeks ago, and I was introduced to
Yeah.
Claude about a month ago, and we use ChatGPT and Grok regularly, and what
Mhm.
Claude can do is leaps and bounds above what we were doing in ChatGPT. And even talking with our developers, you can basically tell it what you want to create, and you can hand off that code right now to a developer and do it for minimal cost and create exactly what you're talking about, the TMS system. And AI will be able to handle that for you. And soon it'll be able to build it, without even having to go through the developer. So if you're not an affordable piece of technology that, like I said, people are going to go elsewhere. People are going to find ways to cut their costs. And AI will tell them, if AI can't do it, it'll tell them where to go and get it.
There we go.
Well,
Yep.
even I mean, my girlfriend, her son-in-law is a computer whiz, and she's helping show me the way, in fact, and she isn't in the industry. She just showed me where you ask AI what would be the best solution for this for your company, and it'll give
Hmm.
you answers as to specific types
Yep.
of software that would make more sense for you, given the questions you've asked. So
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday in a group. We were saying, I don't know if we necessarily work less, or we were actually on a podcast with another
Mhm.
individual, and we were talking about, I don't know if we really work less, but we get more done in a
More
shorter amount of
efficient.
time. We're much more efficient. We can go through, I mean, what used to take months to build out systems or build reports and try and figure things out,
Yep.
AI is solving in a matter of minutes or
Well,
seconds.
well, then it also saves that data. Every time you talk about your company, it gets that much more information that it just feeds off of that and stores it where, it just makes your job easier. If you got an ideal, just something that pops in your head. I do this. I'm like literally multiple times a day. I throw it in there and it just starts spitting stuff, and I refine it. And I think you're talking about companies that can't afford it. There's a lot of these TMS systems that you don't need half of it if for your business. So if you go and create just a few little niches out of it you need for pennies on the dollar that works just for you, you don't care if it works for somebody else or not, as long as it works for your company and your benefits. It's definitely the way to go. Because I mean, like John said, you tell it what you want, it's going to give you the code. Then you just find some young person who's can do the code, and boom, you can be up and running probably 24 hours probably.
is you really the issue comes in when you want to scale, when you get to a point where you've gone from
Mhm.
10 trucks, so you want to go to 25 or 30 or what have you. That's when it really becomes more challenging, because you have to kind of it's in a chicken and the egg. Do you have the systems in place to handle that kind of business, or vice versa?
How many trucks are you running? And then are you also doing brokerage?
So we have presently we have 14 company trucks and 4 owner operators.
Hmm.
All the tractors are full service leased from Rush. Fluctuated up and down as far as the kind of trucks right now. Again, great freight recession. So we haven't replaced a lot of owner operators who've left for theoretically greener pastures.
Right.
We have Again, we're primarily intermodal, so we have a lot of chassis, and we do have a warehouse. We do a lot of transloading. We do have technically we have Acme Logistics as a brokerage, although I have to say that we don't really do a lot with it. Essentially, we just have it in the event that something we don't want to handle that's local, to farm it out. I've always felt that to do brokerage right, you have to have a big pool of money. Because everybody wants to get paid before you get paid, and I've never been wanting to go out on that limb yet. And
Yeah,
that
a lot
plus,
of a lot of drivers don't necessarily realize that everybody's quick to criticize the brokerages, and there's definitely, criticism to be had, but they don't realize that the driver is in most circumstances, depending on the carrier, the driver is in most circumstances getting paid first. They're getting paid before everybody else. Before the money has even come from the customer,
Hmm.
to pay that broker.
I mean, that's the way it should be.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Oh, I'm not upset.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've had this discussion where, I mean, let's face it, there are some brokers who will wait for the money to come to them before they want to pay you.
Right.
But
Hmm.
that, of course, is not the way it's supposed to go.
Hmm.
I just recently had a conversation where a broker was saying, well, we're after them to pay us. We're like, well, our customer hasn't paid us yet. It's like, well, that's not really our problem because your customer is not our customer. You are our
You
customer and
are a
you owe
customer.
us
That's
the
That's
right.
right.
money.
Absolutely.
So that gets me into, well, I kind of have a two-part question here. You've got a view of this industry most people don't. You've lived through multiple market cycles, seen the technology waves as they come and go, and you're running a company that's survived and grown through all of it. When you look at transportation, what concerns you most? But before you answer that, I also want to get into the Supreme Court decision on broker liability. It was voted 9-0. What are your opinions on that as well, in addition to where we're going in our industry, where it's at its current state, and where we're going, next few years?
Yeah, you're actually educating me. I know about the case, but I'm not sure how it turned out. I'm assuming it was a 9-0
Nine to
against.
nothing against. So freight brokers are now liable for the driver who is behind the wheel. They are now liable and can be held accountable if something happened, if there were an accident to happen.
I had to say I'm a little bit surprised by that.
And shippers.
And
Everybody was
shippers.
surprised. It's
Hmm.
9 because now shippers are also responsible as well.
Yep.
Well, and I have to say that I guess in some respects I would say that that's kind of encouraging to me because it means that they'll have to have some skin in the game.
Well, a lot of shippers started their own brokerages because they instead of
Hmm.
putting on the drivers themselves, they started a brokerage, and then that was originally that was done to shield them. Now they have no protection.
Yep.
Well, I mean, this gets complicated, right? I mean, on one hand, those of us who are carriers with assets feel, I mean, sure, we all feel this way as we're driving down the highway and we see trucks going by held together with duct tape and
Hmm.
obvious
Hmm.
violations on it. And it's like,
Right.
these are the guys who are getting these rates who can afford to charge really substandard rates. And if they had to play all by the same rules, it might be a little more even playing field for everyone. So in that respect, when the broker and the customer, the shippers are forced to actually find carriers who are legit, who pay attention to safety, who make sure their trucks are in good shape and their drivers are following the law, I think that that's a good thing. On the other hand, it points to the problem of the industry overall, which is that plaintiffs' attorneys are out of control. There needs to be tort reform. I mean,
Yeah.
here in Chicago, I don't know about you
Hmm.
guys. I think you're Florida and Kentucky. Maybe I think you
Florida
guys
and yeah,
Yeah,
I'm in
Tennessee.
Tampa and he's in Tennessee.
Yep.
Tennessee. Okay, so I don't know about where down Tennessee and Florida, but here in Chicago, every other billboard is a smiling lawyer saying "truck accident, call the hammer."
Yeah.
And and I
Yes.
don't see any.
It's funny around a lot of truck yards, even over here, you
Yep.
see attorney signs everywhere.
Yep.
Exactly. And that's, and I've often said, I love to hate insurance companies or just hate to love them. But, I've asked the question, so why is it that you guys don't have, a billboard once in a while that says shame on you for these bogus claims? I mean, I think we all can. I know myself, I've wound up having settling something like $50,000 on a claim that was bogus, and
Mm.
it's become it's become an industry where the attorneys are making money off of our back. That's not good. And I guess to answer your question, what is my biggest concern? That is probably my biggest concern. I mean, the reality is, if we were to, God forbid, kill somebody, the company's done.
Yep.
We don't have the kind of resources to pay off a multi-million-dollar
Well,
verdict.
that's what they've talked about. That's what they've been talking about the last couple of days. Like small to mid-sized carriers can't survive this.
And so I guess it's one thing to say, okay, we're going to make the shippers and the brokers responsible, but okay, well, who's doing something about tort reform? I mean, there really needs to be tort reform in the country. I
Hmm.
mean, I understand it's a tragedy when someone's hurt or killed, but what's a life worth? Is it worth $100 million? I don't know.
Well, I want to ask your opinion from the rail side. So, my honest opinion, I think with all the fraud, with now this Supreme Court ruling, and then you add in at some point autonomous trucks are going to, really creep into the industry. I feel like the industry is going to go away from over the road long haul stuff. I think you're going to have more regional trucking companies that are going to be more prominent. You're going to have more regional runs, maybe have it go to a warehouse and then have box truck deliveries more. Because I don't think trucking and the rails, I don't think they work enough together. And I think too, before you answer, I think during COVID, we all got used, and carriers did as well, that hey, we don't have to have that product there the next day. Like for instance, team driving's almost a thing of the past now because of COVID. People realize I can wait a day or two and save a little money. It's all, a lot of times it is cheaper to ship on the rail. And I live near Memphis, and they've got a huge rail presence, and container ports and everything from the Mississippi River. And I see just tons of trailers on trains that run through the town that I live in. Do you see where that maybe takes an up step to where more stuff gets put on a train to cross the country versus having all these issues with liabilities and such?
Railroads do well hauling heavy products long distances.
Hmm.
That's what they do best. And if you look at the if you're familiar with the history of J.B. Hunt and the Santa Fe Railway,
Mhm.
where a gentleman named Krebs, was it Krebs, invited JB to ride on their business train, and as they're going from LA eastward, they're passing all these trucks on the highway. They say, "Look at that! Look at all these trucks that we were going past right here. We could be putting those trucks on this train." And I believe it's safe to say that the vast majority of West to East Coast JB Hunt goes by train now
It
to
goes by
this day.
train. Yeah.
Yep.
You can look at a train and it's great marketing for JB Hunt.
It
Yes, it
is.
is. Yes, it is. And I favor rail. I mean, I think I've always been a big train guy. I think the railroads, and not to say that the railroads are right in many respects, they do things poorly as well, but they're inherently efficient. You think about it, you got one or two guys running 200 trailers. You can't beat that. That's
Mm-mm.
that. Otherwise, 200 truck drivers driving across the country. And the reality is that they always talk about the driver shortage, which is kind of a bit of a myth, but
Yeah.
many of my guys have been over the road and just got tired of not being home. And now
Yep.
my guys are home every night.
Right.
We pay by the hour. You get overtime after 40, and your life is generally better, and you still make a decent living. I think that in the long run, I mean, let's trade. Truck driving is a hard job, and being gone on the road for 2 hours, two weeks at a time, forever at a time, is just hard to deal with, and it's
Mhm.
a quality of life issue. And I think the current generation is less likely to want to put up with that anyway.
Yeah,
And
I
so
agree.
now I think the challenges for the railroads is that I think they'll sit there and tell you that they can handle growth, but the reality is, if we look at what happened during COVID, railroad yards melted down for lack of chassis, for lack of employees
Mm.
to ground the containers. I know we had nightmares where we had boxes sitting in rail yards for weeks because there weren't any
Oh yeah, I
chances to
remember
put them
that.
on.
Hmm.
Yep.
And I think that it comes down to sort of a matter of, do you build the rail yard or the church for Easter Sunday, or you build it for every Sunday? And
Mhm.
what winds up happening is you get these peaks and valleys, and nobody wants to spend the money to have a surge capability of chassis, of staffing, of track, and that's the challenge, is to balance that out. Where that goes, who knows? We'll see. I mean, after COVID, a lot of the railroads talked about trying to keep a lot of that capacity in place so they could handle those traffic surges, but I don't know. I'm not sure that that's really true. I'm skeptical when they say that, oh, we can handle all this. If we grow 10%, we can handle it. I'm not so sure about that.
You just brought something up that I've got to ask about. I've had a dabble in containers out of Memphis. I know you say Chicago's bad. Memphis container rail yards is the pits. It really is. Do you, and it
The
sounds like
pits.
from what you said, you have the same problem. So why is it a problem? Chassis. You can never find chassis. There's never chassis. It's like everybody hoards them, but you get nailed to the wall if it's not turned in a certain amount of time. And Memphis was horrible. If you wasn't in there by 7 o'clock in the morning, you wasn't getting a chassis all day. So everybody would do what we would do and work all weekend and snatch every chassis we could find through the weekend, and we would take it to a yard across the street, load it, and it would sit there. And then so I guess everybody did it. So that would I think needs to be fixed for anything happens because I would imagine that's a problem everywhere.
It is a problem. It's not so much of a problem now because the business has been down quite a bit. Although there's been sort of artificial problems with chassis availability because the chassis companies will take them out of circulation so that they don't have that cost. Again, it's do you build it for Easter Sunday or do you build it for every Sunday? Part of the problem is also the model that the United States uses. Like in Europe, all the facilities are what would be called a grounded facility where the containers are put on the ground rather than directly on the chassis, a wheeled facility.
Hmm.
So if you're bringing your own chassis, then I think it's much more manageable for each individual company. We have our own chassis. If it's understood that you have to bring your own chassis, you're going to have one, and it's up to you to
Exactly.
manage it. You're not beholden to a grade pool, to make sure that it's available and
Mhm.
functional. Because it's not a lot of times, we spend a lot of time at rail yards fixing somebody else's equipment.
Yes.
And the way it's all set up
That's right.
is essentially we inspect everybody else's equipment and move it around for them too. You
Hmm.
know, if, and I'm not sure that people understand that because the chassis companies have it set up so that if we're going to drive safely on the road and not get take the risk of being pulled over and getting violations, we have to check sure the lights are working, the brakes are working, and if it's not, we take it to be repaired within the rail yard. So we're moving it for them there. We're inspecting it, we're moving it.
That's
Then
true.
when we're done with it, if they we don't need chassis over at this yard, but we do over there. So instead of taking it where you got it from, you got to take it someplace else, which might be 50 miles further. Uh, you know, and then they're not paying us for that. But
No.
so then we have to charge our customer, and sometimes the customer doesn't really understand why it is we have to charge an extra $100 to move a
I don't think
chassis.
anyone understands.
Uh-uh. That's all right.
Yeah. And I think that that's part of the. I mean, we're kind of a little diverting, and that's part of the problem with intermodal is quite complicated, and not everybody gets it. I think that's part of the problem that brokerages have is that they're thinking that everything is like a point A to point B dry van move, where it's simple, load it and deliver it, and that's not the way it is in intermodal. There's a lot more moving parts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that gets me to my question as we get towards the end here. For younger professionals coming up in logistics and transportation right now, someone who wants to build a career, not just a job, what would you tell them? Where would you tell them to start?
Well, I tell them to try everything. I'm involved with the Traffic Club of Chicago. We do scholarships for folks, and they'll do technology, they'll do logistics, they'll do rail, they'll do engineering. Try it all. Yeah, I would argue that really what you want to do is what do you like the best? Because ultimately, if you're going to do this for the rest of your life, you should at least not hate it. At least
Right.
as far as where do I see the future, I mean, you're never going to go wrong with technology. If you can, work with integration of technology into the hard asset, movement of freight, I don't think you can go wrong. And I think ultimately, trucks aren't going to go away. Their over the road mode may diminish or their use may diminish, but I think intermodal ultimately is the way to go. Although keep in mind that right now intermodal is only like what, 10% of the market. The vast majority of freight still goes by truck.
Right.
And me, myself, again, I'm an advocate of intermodal. I think it's the most efficient use of both modes, of all modes. And I just don't see it going away. Like now with fuel prices as high as they are, they look a lot better. When you're paying $6 a gallon for diesel, it's a lot better to use that money to run 100 trailers than one.
And talk to these young people who are glued to a computer all day long or playing Roblox or whatever it may be, Call of Duty. How important like getting out and networking and relationships are in building your career. And I still think it's all about who you know. It's really going out there, networking, having conversations, putting a face with a name. How important do you think that is?
It's very important. I mean, as just mentioned, I'm the past president of the Traffic Club of Chicago. Just last night we had our 118th annual dinner, and
Wow.
Jim Vena, the president of Union Pacific, who's currently trying to merge or buy the Norfolk Southern,
Hmm.
was our speaker,
Oh.
and we had 550 people there, all in transportation, all talking to each other. The connections that are made in those kind of organizations are, they may not pay off today, but when you can say, "Oh, I know that guy from such and such," there's always a connection. And ultimately, if you're going on LinkedIn or whatever to try to find your job, all you are is just a faceless name on a list.
Right.
But if you're somebody
Yeah.
who's actually met somebody and say, "Oh, I remember that guy. He's a great guy. He seems like he's on the ball. He knew what he's talking about, or was talking about," that makes a huge difference. And also, some people think, "Oh, these," yeah. And I noticed this has been a problem with the clubs like the Traffic Club and over the years, ever since deregulation, because back in deregulation days, everybody had the same rate, and so it wasn't so much about the price; it was about who you knew. Well, I like this guy, so I'm going to give him my freight.
Right.
Ever since that, now it's become more about price. But so a lot of some of these clubs have struggled. But and I think that just the nature, as you mentioned, the Call of Duty players. Why do we don't have to go outside? We can just stay at home and not do anything. Why do I want to put my take off my sweatpants and put on some jeans to go out and see somebody? But ultimately, it makes a difference. It really does make a difference when you actually see people, and they get to know you, and you get to know them, and it can be fun. I mean, it doesn't have to be stodgy, like talking business all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
I've
I
come
think
to
it's a
find
blast.
and it really and I think it also really all depends on the people. I mean, I've made some
Sure.
really good friends who I go out with, and
Yeah.
so by all means, get out there and show your flag and show people what you're like, and it'll pay off in the end.
Absolutely. Well said.
And I think what you say is important too about joining clubs and places that are in the industry or that you're in or in your town, like what you're talking about with the traffic club. That's great networking. Before we go, I wanted to let you give yourself a plug, let everybody know where they can get a hold of you at. But I would like for you to talk a little bit about that scholarship programs that y'all offer in case there's somebody out there listening to junior or senior that is going to give this transportation opportunity. If you want to plug that a little bit, we'd appreciate that as well.
Sure. So probably the best thing to do related to anything Traffic Club of Chicago is to go to trafficclub.org, traffic-club.org, or just Google the Chicago Traffic Club. It'll come up, and there's things on there about the scholarship program and all the various events that are coming up. I think last year we gave away about $30,000 worth of scholarships, a
Nice.
couple $5,000 ones, a couple $2,500 ones. It doesn't necessarily have to be in transportation. If you're a member of the club and you have a child or a grandchild who's interested in going to school, that's a possibility as well. Blind vetting of applicants. And the scholarships are actually, I think they've already been selected for this year, but next
Mhm.
year will be an option. So by all means. And then as far as I go, I mean, if you got anything you want to move intermodally in Chicago, we may be the ones to help you out. We do a lot of overweight stuff. That's one of the things that we specialize in. We do a lot of steel imports, transload and pull them out of containers and put them in the warehouse and put them on over the road trucks. We have a warehouse in University Park, which is straight south of Chicago. We go about 250 miles from Chicago with freight of all kinds. If you want to work for us too, that's an option. We have a couple slots right now for drivers. You're home every night, and
Excellent.
Yeah.
we pay overtime after 40, and you just want to have a good, reliable, safe driver. That's what we're looking for. And we have a very eclectic group. We have all male and female drivers. We have all race drivers, different languages. I've always been a believer of, you get the job done. I don't care who you are or who you like or who you don't like. It doesn't matter to me. We're all about moving the freight.
That's right. Well, good.
Absolutely.
Well, Tracy, this has been a great conversation. We really appreciate you coming on. Justin, you want to close us out and thank our sponsors real quick?
Yeah, definitely. We want to thank them for helping us bring this to the audience. This episode is brought to you by Gray Cross. That's graycross.org. Gray Cross is focused on supporting trucking families and the people who keep America moving every day. When drivers or trucking families face medical emergencies, financial hardship, loss of income, or unexpected life events, Gray Cross steps in and helps. They provide real assistance and support in difficult times. And then also our main sponsor, ReadyApp. We appreciate what they do for the industry. ReadyApp is helping modernize the connection between drivers, carriers, and brokers through a verified driver profile passport and streamlines onboarding tools designed specifically for the trucking industry. So drivers, you can get you a passport. It'll organize your CDL information, your work history, your endorsements, all your certifications, any onboarding documents you need can be sent by one actual button to any carrier, to an insurance company. Coming up to the DOT, you'll be able to send your stuff digitally to them. So go check that out. And for carriers and brokers, ReadyApp helps reduce paperwork, improve visibility, and speeds up onboarding and creates a more efficient and hiring process by bringing structure and verification into the trucking operations. And I want to stress the verification side. With everything that's going on now, ReadyApp is going to revolutionize that for drivers and carriers and brokers. So go check them out, ready-app.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, make sure you subscribe and share the show. We're on iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube. We'll catch you on the next time on the next episode of Trucker Talk Radio. We really appreciate you coming on. Thanks and have a good day.